Hello, everybody, and welcome to the virtual pet fair. And I hope you guys are having a good time. I hope that you're learning a lot. I know that we're hoping to get a bunch of adoptions here. Normally, we'd all be live together, but we're not because that's what's happening right now. And it's cool because we're getting our way around it. We're still getting animals adopted. What's up, everybody? I'm seeing that chat. Come on in. Good to see you all. And it's great, man. You know what I love? I love the fact that one of the first chat people who came up here, David Cullum, with a picture of a golden retriever as your avatar. Great. We are all happily bipedal and loving all animals. We don't believe in the cat people and the dog people. At least I don't. I just yin yang, man, they work together beautifully. And I say that until one of my dogs starts barking, which is just bound to happen at this point. But we all love animals, right? We'll put up with it. As I'm like, stop it. Anyway, good to see you guys. And today we're going to be talking about catification. Catification. First, of course, let's define it. I mean, it's defined really in the title of the seminar, but it is the concept of environmentally enriching your home. Now, the thing that's really important about the concept of catification is that it is that meeting point. It is that middle point between what works for you and what works for your cat. And the reason why I'm so sort of definitive about that is because, I've been going into people's homes and working with their cats for over 25 years. And from the very beginning, from the very get-go, like the first couple of houses I went into, and I said, well, one of the things you guys can do is, put a little, and I would do this thing, little, vertical space, a couple of cat trees, a couple of this, and I would explain why the cat needs that, which I will here too. And I would get pushback because there were reasons that folks would avoid it. And mainly it was because it didn't work for them. They didn't like a certain look, or they didn't like to advertise to the world that this was a cat home, or whatever the reason was. It was all valid. And that's when I started to sort of formulate the idea of catification and letting folks know right off the bat that whatever it is that we want to do that's going to really make your cat's life its best possible through environmental enrichment, we can still make you happy. And that's where we sit today. So let's start with why catification is so important. It starts with, where I would talk about with any discussion that we were having, which is to get to know cat with a capital C, all cats. Of course, all cats are also individuals, little cat snowflakes, but they come from the same cloud, they come from who I would call the raw cat, that ancestral cat 10,000 years ago, in the desert, making their way to having relationships with humans. And the thing that really differentiates cat from dog, apart from the fact that they're a completely different species, is that we didn't do anything to cats along the way. We didn't selectively breed them. We didn't go for what was going to be, the cat that crawled into your bed at night and that kind of thing. Cats did a job, Cats were protecting our food source for the most part. And as we started to gather food and store food, of course, rats and mice were killer, and then of course we got sick because rats and mice were pooping in our food, and cats come along and we're like, wow, you do this really, really well. Come on along. And that was it. I mean, if you push aside the last 150 years or so of that 10,000 year journey, uh, cats did a job. They didn't really live in our homes for the most part. I mean, think about it. Cat litter was only invented in the 1930s. And before then, there really wasn't a convenient way to keep them indoors, if we wanted to. So it's been a very hands-off evolutionary process, us with cats. So now, with that in mind, now we've made that move primarily to have cats indoors with us in our homes. Well, they still have needs. They still have needs that would keep their cat mojo intact, a lot of that has to do with feeling like they own territory confidently. But part of that territory is their ownership of the territory that we don't really take into consideration. I mean, when we walk into a room, looking at my desk, I sit down, I'm looking at the screen. What I'm not looking at usually is up there. I'm not really, but your cat walks into a room, and by and large, a lot of cats are just going to be like, ooh, what's that? Because that belongs to them. All of this belongs to them. No other species in your house can confidently claim that territory. Not your dogs or you or your kids or whomever else, nobody. So that's really important because that marks a part of their world that expands their mojo, because it's like you living or me living in this house and deciding, what, I'm going to pop the top on this house, create a second story. I would feel afterwards that I owned more, which I would. Your cats feel like that just in this room, just having places above them or above us or anywhere on the vertical axis. It increases the mojo as long as they feel like they can own it. So when I talk about the vertical axis, we want to talk about the concept of the confident where, is what I call it. Confident where is that point on the vertical axis where your cat goes, yeah, you see how my body just changed? I just went from this to, that's right, all cats want ownership of some place on the vertical axis, but not all cats want the same spot. A good example is one of my cats, Caroline. It's a long story I won't go into because we don't have a whole lot of time, except to say that when she was young, and she came from a feral mom, and she was fostered until she was about 16 weeks old, and she still had that kind of hidey thing. Hi, Caroline. But she would hide underneath things. So I blocked off the unders because I said, I don't want that for you. I don't want you to be fearful. So I made spaces for her way up high. Well, here's the thing. She went all the way to the ceiling and hid up there. I was like, okay, well, going to have to block that. I just don't want that for you. And I couldn't find this place. So one day I walk into the house, and there was Caroline sitting on the arm of the couch like this, like, welcome home, Daddy. that whole thing. Chest out, just ears up. I said, okay, that's it. That's Caroline's confident where, right at that height. And I started just giving her more. And by giving her more, I brought out the best in Caroline and made it so that she understood what it felt like to be mojofied, to have ownership. And that changed her life. So every cat will have a different confident where. So with that knowledge, knowing cats with a capital C, knowing we have to get your cat with a little c, well, your cat has a capital C too, but capital Caroline, but you get what I'm saying. So we want to find that space for them and then build around it. Now, if you're like me and you have 5 cats, you throw sort of environmentally enriched spaghetti against the wall and see where that wear is. And then it allows you to build around it. So one of the, and really, honestly, the way to do that is to experiment. Is, first of all, you've got plenty of furniture around the house. Where does your cat like to live? Now, I'm not saying that there aren't cats who find their mojo down low. I call them bush dwellers, right? And you know the difference between a Heidi cat and a bush dweller. A bush dweller sits down there, maybe under the dining room table or whatever, and they're sitting there waiting for, their prey, aka your ankles or whatever, to walk by, and then they pounce out and then they run. That's a bush dweller. And a tree dweller ultimately gets their confidence up there. And then there's the meeting point. So I'm not saying that we don't want to enrich the ground. I will say this, that if you live in a house, again, like mine, where we have cats and dogs, you realize that there's a lot of competition for floor space. Humans, dogs, and cats, whatever else is going on in your house. We all compete for that space. So even though we can enrich for our bush dwellers through beds and that kind of thing, anything where they can soak their scent into and get ownership that way, we still want to give them the choice. Even if that's enriching a spot that's just, here's the floor, here's a little, elevated bed. And then it gives them that choice to say, I think I just want to get away from your feet and still, have my confident wear. So there is, a degree of experimenting. Another thing that I will say, I just mentioned the words scent soaker. And a scent soaker is another source of confidence. A scent soaker is anything where your cat soaks their scent. And I don't mean with pee, I mean with their body. So anything they sit on, sleep on, rub up against, anything like that holds their scent, that's a scent soaker. And so that's why, we go for things that might have that texture that retains scent. So that's why your sort of average cat bed or tree or whatever has that kind of fabric on it. So we do want to work with that concept in mind. Another thing that I will say, and this is sort of a baseline catification thing, and the one that gets the most pushback, is that the king of scent soakers is a litter box. A litter box is the king of all scent soakers because their scent is strongly in it. And I know that, and this is really, when you talk about the glitch in catification, that place where we may not meet at human needs and cat needs, is that we want to put our litter boxes where we can't see them all the time, which is why litter boxes wind up in either bathrooms or laundry rooms or garages or mud rooms or places like that. And even if they're in more socially significant areas, they're tucked away in a place where we use that furniture that looks like something but has a litter box in it. All of these things, don't really do a service to your cat or to you. Litter boxes should be out, Now, of course, that's in a perfect world. And even though I'm not a huge fan of those pieces of furniture that you put a litter box in, I'll take that over not having one, and so will your cat. But that's just something to remember, that these scent soakers, they provide a series of what I would call sort of territorial signposts. They're ways of saying, I belong here, I own this. I walk by something, I smell myself on it, cool, I keep walking. This belongs to me. And whether, like I said, if you have 5 cats, they all rub up against something, it's okay. Cats live in communities. They're not solitary as we think they are. They'll rub up against something to make sure that they own it also. But these signposts are really important. To put it in the perspective of humans, let's say that you have a mantle, and every time you walk by that mantle, and you have pictures on that mantle, pictures of you, your friends, your family, your animal family, human, whatever. And every time you look by it, whether you realize it or not, every time you walk by it, you are reminded that you have a life that matters, that you own, you know? And that's a signpost. And that's where scent soakers, pieces of furniture, etc., are those signposts for cats. And when you think about it, that sense of I exist, I own, is like when cats hang out on your bed or on the couch where your scent is strong. And that's really important for them to sort of complement their scent with yours. So these are some basics of catification, some of the basic sort of underlying concepts. Now, where do we go from here? Where do we go in terms of starting to catify our lives, our homes? One of the first things I would have you look at is the concept that I call the cat superhighway. And that's someplace on the vertical axis, and it could occupy a number of different spaces on the vertical axis, which of course I encourage, because that's the best way to get to know who your cat is to give them these options. But if you take one of the most socially significant areas of your home, and I would say usually that's either the living room or the bedroom. Again, as I was referring to before, your scent is really strong in those places. I mean, let's face facts, you guys. When we're home, you know, albeit we may have projects or whatever around the house, but we have that area where we sit with the family, we watch TV, we do whatever, we relax, and then we have our beds, right? So between those two, that's a big bulk of where we spend our time when we're home. So that's where our cats will also just want to be near to complement that scent. So those are the two socially significant areas I would have you look at. Then when we talk about the cat superhighway, we start thinking about how to get your cat this chunk of vertical space where they can go around the whole room without touching the floor, in and out and around and out. Now that's especially good, again, when you've got dogs or small kids, or anybody who can compete in a potentially negative way with your cat's need to own territory. This way they can get above or around and make that choice. Do I feel safer and more secure and more mojo-fied up here? Or am I cool on the floor or somewhere in between? Now, if you've watched my show before, if you've read any of my books, you know that I can go pretty big when it comes to building this cat superhighway, and pretty, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know, over the top, so to speak. That doesn't need to happen, because one of the things I just want you to bear in mind as we talk about all the rest of this is it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be this grand, architecturally thought out process. It just has to be a start. And from that start, you might see things from your cat that make you go, okay, cool. Yeah, let's do this now. But I would say start from this place of saying, all right, I'm just going to do this, but it's scalable. So if I want to get big, I can, as opposed to thinking big or trying to think big, because I will say this is true of me and so many other people that I've worked with and that I know. We get that sort of paralysis by analysis where we just get completely overwhelmed by the amount of work we're thinking of, and then we just don't do anything, and our cats are sitting on the floor like, So let's start with something. So what could that something be? If we talk about the cat superhighway, we want to think about, and I use that term because I want you to think about sort of urban planning, about traffic control, what you can do with that concept. So one of those concepts is an on-ramp, Your cat wants an on-ramp onto the superhighway. And then off-ramps, pit stops along the way. These are just important concepts to think about, So one of the first things that you can think about is, all right, my cat likes to sleep on the back of my couch. Okay, cool. Maybe that's the on-ramp. So from there, we think, what's next? Well, maybe off the couch, we can put a shelf up. And that shelf just is one stop along the highway. From the shelf, where do we go? Well, we can do more shelving. We can do cat trees. It can be something that you already have. It could be, if you're willing to cede control of your mantle, that becomes another stop on the highway, or a bookcase, or the TV console, or anything that's already an existing piece of furniture that just helps your cat get from A to B. And we can build in that way where we have a series of on-ramps. Cat trees and cat condos are great on-ramps, because somewhere along the vertical axis on that tree is where your cat's going to be like, that's all right. I feel good. I feel all right, And then from there, we can start getting them around the rest of the room. So what the cat superhighway achieves is that sense of, number one, finding the confident wear. Number two, popping the top on the territory and giving them more space. And I will say that this is ultra important if you've got a multiple cat household. Ultra important. Because you create lanes of highway, around the room. Floor, chair level, eye level, up. And that way, again, this is that urban planning thing. It's the difference between a highway and a one-lane blacktop road. It's just, if you're like, a car and here's the ice cream truck and we don't have lanes, someone's going to wind up in the ditch, And we don't want that. We don't want your cat winding up in the ditch. So we create these lanes. So if they feel like just being apart from, they can. If they feel like joining, they can. And that's what the urban planning in the vertical world is all about. Now, I will say this. Let's go back to my example with Caroline, my cat. And hold on, please. We also at the same time don't want to encourage hiding. So I am not a fan of cats choosing to be under the bed or cats choosing to be in the closet. These are, and you can say, well, that's their chill out spot. Okay, well, cool. Make a chill out spot where you have control, where you dictate, basically where they are and how long they're going to be there. Because if a cat has that sort of instinct to hide, unless we challenge them a little bit, they will always make that choice. Until one day, maybe they don't. But we don't want to wait for that day. I mean, just as if our cats are in that way like our children, where if we just allow them to make up their mind based on their fear, then they will never take up that challenge, or the chances are greatly reduced. So apart from advocating for platform beds, for beds that just don't have unders, I do recommend that you block off the unders of the bed and provide them with a bush dwelling space. But with that, see, that's the difference between under the bed and, let's say, the type of bed that may have a little bit of covering to it. Okay, well, we can put it around that spot near the bed. Now they can retreat. But we then, as their parents, get to say, we got to push that line a little bit. So let's start moving that bed. See the difference between under the bed and that, or the closet and that, and how we tend to also just unwittingly, and I'm not putting any of your feet to the fire right now. We've done that here in this house unwittingly. We just cater to the fear, to the smallness. Put a bed in the closet. Put a bed under the bed. It happens. And we just have to sort of remember that we're trying to parent in a way that we're creating or helping to bring out the best version of themselves that we can. And there's no way that that happens with the unders. So I would say block off the unders. And find another solution to changing that fear-based habitation to one that encourages mojo, you know. And the same thing, like I said, goes for those way high hiding spaces. When you're creating your superhighway, another thing that I don't really recommend is that you do it all the way at the ceiling. Because again, you're turning a cat who may have that fear into the rafter cat, that almost acting feral in a way, that they're so far removed from the action that they're never inclined to join unless there's food, you know. So I would avoid that too. And another aspect here is both from the unders and the overs, that if, God forbid, there's some sort of an emergency in your house, and here in California, we know all about it, right? From fires to earthquakes, we know all about it. We need to be able to get our cats out of the house, and quickly. And if they're under the bed, or if they're in the closet, or if they're up in the rafters, and we don't have control, like instant control of getting them out, then that could be disastrous. So again, catification also, you want to be thinking about that. You know, and again, that's that meeting point. Where do our cats want to be, and where do we want them to be, and what do we want it to look like, etc. So just some basic concepts to think about when you are beginning to catify. So we've talked about the cat superhighway, and one of the other things I want to get back to on the highway, and this is again, if you've got multiple cats, and if you don't have multiple cats, why? You should have multiple cats, and we should all have more cats. Well, within reason. But let's assume that you do have multiples. Then we want to start thinking even more about urban planning, about traffic control. So one of the things that we really want to start thinking about is dead ends. So when you're creating that superhighway, or even any place around the house where your cats hang out, just make sure that nobody can get trapped anywhere else, or that you're mitigating that possibility as best you can. So that's why when we're building the superhighway, we're thinking about, okay, we have a shelf that goes around here. Well, maybe what we'll do is space these two shelves and have another one underneath, or just a break in the shelving, just big enough for them to hop, but below is where the couch is, so that we can always change lanes, get out of each other's way. If you do happen to have a cat that's a bit of a bully, that way they're never being able to trap another cat. Or let's say you have a dog. This is a perfect example. Again, not to get back into litter boxes, but if you got cats, then you're dealing with litter boxes. So in this case, this is why I'm not a fan of who just typed that? Caroline. Don't encourage my wife to get more cats. That's what I'm here for, man. I'm a cat pusher. We're trying to get adoptions done here. But anyway, this is why I'm one of the reasons I really don't like having those hoods on your litter boxes, those tops, because, and there it is. See, I told you my dogs would bark at some point. And because I'm about to talk about the dogs. So even if that's about, your bully cat, or just not even a bully. Let's say you have someone who just loves to play and they see someone in the litter box and they're like, cool, let's play. I hear you scratching. Let's do it. And they're trapped in there. One of the things to remember about the raw cat is that they always, and I don't care if they're feral or if they're your 14-year-old Persian, it's there. It's in the back of their head that they need escape routes. They have to, Out there, that raw cat is smack in the middle of the food chain, meaning they're always hunting and they're always being hunted. Their head has to be on a swivel. They are programmed to get away. So if there is no away, if you have thrown that litter box into the corner of the laundry room behind the washer, and there's a hood on that box, and your cat is faced with that prospect, and let's remember the dogs. Dogs love, sorry you guys, and I know that you're going to say, oh no, my dog doesn't do that. I would say at least 50% of dogs love litter boxes. They love sticking their noses in there. They love cat poop. It is what it is. But let's say we have that same scenario, box in a corner in the laundry room, hood on the box. Dog comes in because cat's in the box, hears them scratching around like, cool, Your cat is trapped in there. And then the chances of them seeing that litter box as a place of confidence is gone. So this is where we have to meet, This is where our needs and their needs have to meet. So think about dead ends. Think about places that are just ready for ambush, and then try to mitigate them. On-ramps, off-ramps, lanes, pit stops, multiple pit stops, allowing different cats to own different places. And that should be sort of the primary catification element. I'll say one more thing because I know we want to take a few questions, and I just wanted to say one more thing. And of course, as I say that, it slips my brain. We were talking about on-ramps and off-ramps and confident wears, and it's slipping my head. But I think we all get the general concept here of what it is to catify. Oh, that's what I was going to say. Nice going, Jackson. So now we want to also talk about multiple cats and ownership. Here's where I'll start with that. Because, a lot of you guys will be like, well, Chucky owns this bed right here, but then Roy comes along and kicks Chucky out, and that's just not fair. So what do I do about that? Cats have this intricate and, honestly, to the humans, baffling way of time sharing, of space sharing. When I say baffling, I mean, we've tried, science has tried, scientists have tried, behaviorists have tried to discern how this works. We still don't know. And that's okay. As long as we give as many possibilities for them, they will learn that time sharing. And, a lot of times it's based on what's a favorable spot. And I will tell you this last little bit here. I keep saying that, but I'm going to start plowing through this stuff. Windows. Windows are favorite spots, always, because your cats are like sundials. They will follow the sun around the windows of your home. Every window that you can possibly get a bed in there. There's great beds that actually can attach to the windowsill to make it bigger. If your windowsill is big enough, you put one of those flat little mats on there so they have something to soak scent into. That's primary. Windows should be primary. If you guys have a cat tree and it's sitting in a random corner somewhere, Move it right now. Move it to a window, and you will see it get used a lot more often. And it works as sort of, breaking up a little bit of the competition of that space since there's multiple levels. So there's windows. And last thing, now officially last thing, speaking of windows, is Cat TV. That's the other thing about being in a window. It's not just about the sun. What can they watch outside the window? So if you live in a city, it's cool, man. Watching cars and people and whatever, birds fly by, that's all good. If you guys live in a home, think of something like bird feeders or bird baths, something like that, hummingbird feeders, so that your cats have something to watch. Cat TV keeps them busy, keeps them engaged. Okay, that's it, you guys. That's it. I got to wrap this up. Those were the basics. By the way, I've written 2 different books on catification with Kate Benjamin, cat design expert, Catification and Catify to Satisfy. So check those 2 out if you can. And with that, let's start taking some questions here. So I have this on, I'm receiving some questions here. So here's a question, and it's a little vague, so I will just answer this to the best of my interpretation. But it says, if a cat has taken over an area of the house that isn't ideal, what suggestions do you have to getting them to choose other spaces that are preferable? So it depends on how we define ideal. I mean, some people would say that your cat sleeping on your bed's not ideal because they just don't want them to occupy that space. So it's hard for me to really quantify that. But I will say that let's go back to the confident wear. Something about that space makes it desirable for your cat. What is it? What is it about this? This is time to break out your catification detective hat and figure out what makes that the confident wear. Is it the geography? In which case, you should probably cede control. Because if it's about that sort of nexus of activity in the house, like, where the living room and the dining room and the kitchen meet, that's a place where they can see everything coming and going. And again, think about the raw cat. Think about being able to assess the territory in terms of ownership and sort of threat assessment. And having the closest thing to a 360 is the way to do that. Is it that? Is it the surface itself? Are they searching out something that's cool and soft, flat, like your kitchen island? Or are they looking for more soft places, more window places? Then just give them more of that, but in a different location. Whenever you're saying no to your cat, just make sure there's a yes right behind it. Just make sure you're directing them someplace else based on what you know is their needs. And by the way, your cat. If you don't know, these are great sort of little detective things to think about, because the goal is in a lifetime of relationship that you get to know them. And then listen, it's no different from human relationships. You're taking up the bathroom too much. Well, I need to brush my teeth too. Well, you're crowding me. Okay, well then let's either add a bathroom here or take turns. That's problem solving, and that's what you have to do with your cats. Okay, number 2. How many litter boxes do you recommend? Is it per cat or other factors? Well, there is a formula that I think is well established and something that I generally subscribe to, which is that for each cat that you have, you want a litter box plus 1. 1 cat, 2 litter boxes. 2 cats, 3 litter boxes, and so on. Does that work in every situation? No, but it's a great guideline. And that's the number 1 thing. Now, I will say this. Again, humans, we will do anything to sort of minimize litter boxes. I think that's sort of in the back of all of our heads. It's like the raw human. Push aside the litter box. So there's a lot of homes I go to where they'll say, I know, 2 cats, 3 litter boxes, and then they show me the litter boxes, and there's 3 of them pushed together in the basement. No. that counts as one in a not favorable place. This is just life with cats, litter boxes. So add more if you're even questioning this, and try to think about doing it in a space that is favorable, and try not to hide your litter boxes. Yeah, I'm not going to do that one. So the question was, what are some of your favorite cat litters? I'm not going to name brands, even though I do endorse one. But I will say that I'm a fan of not clay litter. I'm a fan of natural litters, and natural litters have come a long, long way, you guys. A lot of them will hold scent better than they used to, clump a lot better than they used to. I'm also not a fan of any kind of scent in litter. If your litter's not good enough to hold scent, then check out another litter. Don't disguise it with the smell of petunias or whatever, because number one, you're just going to have petunia smelling pee. But the other thing is that, cats' sense of smell is quantum leaps better than ours. And they define their life through their sense of smell, much more so than their sense of vision. And we are throwing a massive whammy at them by putting scent in our litter. The last thing I will say also is, again, this is something that you'll see in clay litter more, much more than natural litters, is dust. If you pour out your bag of litter and you're standing over the top of it and you have that moment of this, then imagine every time your cat scratches, they're going to have that moment too. So that's about as specific as I'm going to get on that one. Yeah, you know what? You guys, let's look for questions that are not litter box related. I just want to make sure that I'm getting something based on the rest of this. Yeah, not that one either. That's not catification. Let's try to find something else. But one of them is, what's the best way to move a litter box from one part of the house to another successfully? And it's what is that terrible joke? Oh, what's the best way to eat an elephant? Not that I ever do that, but what's the best way to eat an elephant? And the question is slowly, or no, it's one bite at a time. And that's the way you do it. Is just it. What I can tell you is the cats are not really fond of quick changes, and anyone who's moved house with their cat knows that. And by the way, there are techniques for that as well, which we don't have time for today. But the best thing I can tell you to do is just to move it slowly. If you want to get it from this bathroom that you're at into the living room, let's say, just every day, a couple of feet, that's the best way to do it. And another aspect of this is, when we're talking about changing litters, I will say, and I always say this is an experiment. This is temporary. This is not permanent. If you already have 3 litter boxes and you have 2 cats and you don't want to add another, I totally get it. But what I will say is, if you want to experiment with a new litter, don't mess with what's already kind of working for your cats. Add another box with the new litter in it and put it in a socially significant place and see if they go for it. And if they do, great. Let's start adding that litter to the existing litter boxes. You're adjusting them slowly to a new feel, and you're also not emptying out their scent, that signpost, out of the box and just throwing something brand new in there. Everything goes slowly. Let's see. One of the questions was, how do you help fix bully behavior other than removing dead ends? And I can only say this I want to keep things in the context here of catification. If there's any other aspect to a lot of these questions that I'm seeing, I think we just posted our 300th video on YouTube. You can always go there. Most of these questions are answered there, along with in my books. So just saying. But in terms of removing dead ends, ambush zones are a big one, and lack of resources. So a lot of times with bullies, and I'll refer to bullies, instead of calling them bullies, I call them Napoleons, because, the Napoleon complex, this idea that I don't really have enough to own. I don't feel like I own this, so I'm going to over-own it. And by over-owning, I'm beating you up by sleeping in a certain area. I'm chasing you around because I want this, and you don't get to have it either. A lot of what will fix that, and by fix, I mean, I think the other thing is, I don't want to put cats in such a small sort of box, so to speak. We can't really fix behavior. We can approach it, we can massage it. We're just asking them to make their best decision. In that case, by giving them more to own, checking out where your Napoleon really does love to hang out, that's just something to, then you go, okay, well, Napoleon here loves this window facing this way, and he won't let anybody else near that bed. The way to approach it is more beds on that side of the house, and giving them the choice to be able to start that time sharing. Same thing goes for things like food bowls. With food bowls, I think we make the mistake of thinking that our cats should be okay with, let's say we have 3 cats, we just glom their bowls together into one huge sort of trough, because for some reason we think that the cats like that for whatever reason. They don't. When you think about the raw cat and thinking about, personal bubbles are good. So if, you've got one cat who just snarfs from his bowl and then immediately wants what's in that one, separate them out. They don't have to be even looking at each other in order to eat successfully. You can even, if you've got a cat that's less secure on the ground than they are a little bit higher, accommodate that. Have bowls, eating stations that are raised a little bit. And that way, if that more insecure cat needs to be just a little bit above and looking around to make sure their food supply is sacred, then that's a great way to do it. So again, a lot of this and a lot of catification really does come down to getting to know your cat better, getting to know what it is that makes them secure or insecure, and then building around that. So the next question says, you mentioned each cat having their own spot, but what about when one cat decides he wants to take another spot? I put that in the same category as when I get the question that, I've got a cat who wants to use this other cat's litter box. And that's the thing. This is about living in a group. Mojo for cats is confident ownership of territory, but they know they got to share. They live in a community. They live in a colony. So they have to find that way to work around it. So again, it's about giving more. It's about saying, I know that, and if they do nudge each other out of the way, it's part of their own process. As long as it doesn't end up in fights, then you're cool, If at 12:04, Charlie walks up to this window seat where Roy is sleeping, and Charlie's puts his nose in the other one's butt, just to remind him he's there, and the other one looks and abdicates that bed. And that happens every day at 12:04. That's cool. That's their process. Like I said, as long as it doesn't as long as you're not projecting this, oh, poor Roy doesn't get this spot. Well, Roy had it. He had it. Now someone else is taking it. It's that, and this is up to you to remove yourself a little bit, be a little objective about what's going on, instead of feeling sorry for Roy. Did Roy get his turn? And now, Charlie wants it. And then again, part of the solution here is more. Catify more. You can always pull it back. And I think that's, it's just something to remember, that when I say, we're doing experiments here. If you find after 6 months that no one's using all the stuff that you put down, number one, you can move it and see if maybe you just didn't put it in a favored spot. Or two, scale back, as long as there's peace in the house and everyone seems cool. And the last question here is advice on introducing a new cat to a home with a dog vis-a-vis catification. So again, I've got other areas where I've written about this, and I've approached it in my videos before. From a catification standpoint, we just go back to the idea that cats own the sky. Dogs can't get up where cats are. I think the best way of doing it, and again, there's an introduction technique that I don't have the time to go into right now, but from a catification standpoint, just make sure, number one, your cats can get up and away, that they can observe the goings on without being right there underfoot, of a dog. Number two is making sure that your cat's food supply is safe and not anywhere near the dog. We don't want to encourage any kind of resource guarding or that kind of thing. Number three is that we want to make sure that your dog is trained. And that, I can't even stress that enough. I don't know why in these kind of circumstances the dogs get a pass on this, but if your dog or your puppy cannot hold a stay when a cat walks in the room, then you got to go back to basics and get your dog trained to the point where if you say no, they stop. And because once dogs chase cats, for whatever reason, it damages their relationship to a point where it's hard to come back from. But that's really, and then like I said, the whole thing about hoods on litter boxes and trapping them in their litter box. A big dog knows it has nothing to do with bad intent. Maybe they just want the poop. But a big dog knows in a hooded box in a corner where when a cat's in it, will almost guarantee you that your cat's going to stop using that box on a regular basis. And then you're going to run out of boxes eventually if they're all in dead ends. And then you've really got trouble. Anyway, you guys, that I believe is the last question here. And that pretty much wraps up Catification 101. Like I said, there's a lot more to it that we can add that I can't today. But that's why I have other resources like my books and YouTube and all of these places where you guys can go. You guys are very welcome. Thank you for having me here. Hopefully, the next time we do this, it'll be with each other again. I know that this is not the easiest thing to keep doing, but I am glad that you guys came today. Make sure to check out all of the adoption partners that are on the left-hand side of your screen and the adoption booths. Just remember, we are in a very hard time right now when it comes to animal welfare. Our shelters are packed. Our shelter workers and our rescue workers are burned out. I think that we created a false sense of security, and I'm totally included there, where we said, hey, the pandemic hit, we emptied the shelters. Well, they filled up again, and they keep filling up. And so do everything you can. If you can bring someone else into your home, please do it. If you can foster, please do it. And if not, tell your friends. Donate to any of these adoption partners. be a part of the community in a way that helps our communities get through what is a very, very hard time. All right, everybody. That's it for me. Have fun today. Be safe. Light and love and mojo to all of you. Mwah! Bye, everybody.